Welcome to the second episode of the Hivos podcast, where we are platforming stories of the voices for just climate action, which is a project that has been going on for the last 4 years and we're about to come to an end. And today I am joined by two lovely guests who happen to also be my friends from Docubox and Youth for SDGs. And I'm going to invite them to introduce yourself. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Kenneth Kigunda Harrison, as we heard from Abigail. Thanks for hosting us. I work with Docubox East Africa Film Fund. It's a documentary film fund where we support filmmakers, independent filmmakers, to tell authentic African stories, in all trying to amplify our voices at the grassroots and have African heard across the globe through the use of films. We do support documentaries, but also we support fiction and short films to be able to amplify stories of our people by our people.
Amazing. When you say amplifying stories, I feel at home because I am very passionate about storytelling.
Yeah.
And Sarah, please introduce yourself and tell us what you do and everything about yourself.
Thank you so much for having me, Abigail. My name is Sarah Anupi. I'm an environmental scientist and a project officer at Youth for SDGs Kenya, a youth-led organization that looks to amplify the voices of young people to engage meaningfully in sustainable development matters.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to you, Sarah. You've talked about you being an environmental scientist. Yeah. What does that look like? What exactly do you do? I know you have a lot of stuff that you do, so I really want the world to hear.
Okay. So I have been an environmental scientist for quite a while. Since I graduated, I decided to delve into the space to make sure that the work that the people ahead of me, the work that they started, that I'm also able to continue the same, to secure landscapes, to secure the natural environment in order for people to thrive and to obtain a living from these thriving landscapes. So that is what I do as an environmental scientist. And now I have joined the Youth for SDGs Kenya to also continue the same, to also just make sure that other young people who are doing similar work are also seen and they have a platform where they can go to also deliberate on what they are doing and to also just get support to continue doing meaningful work.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And to you, Ken, I know you're a very passionate journalist, and it's a very, at the moment we are obviously doing a lot of work on climate issues, which is a very important aspect of, we're going through a period of climate crisis, climate emergencies. And so my question is, why did you feel the need to do something on climate when you could have picked anything else?
So the power of storytelling, and we believe that as Africans, and if we look at our history, we have been brought up being told stories, how we learn about our culture, how we learn about our independence, how we acquired it, how we learn about where we are born, our tribes, and all these things is through storytelling. And so sometimes you find the language within the climate space is very complex and jargonistic. People use quite big words. I believe if you have been into COPs and several of them, and you find yourself, even as a person who has experienced and, of course, academic background within the climate space, still struggle with some words that come out every time, and the nuances that are within the climate storytelling. So that's why I found it's very important for us to be able to center our conversation through storytelling. And this is using a language that everyone will be able to understand. It can be in form of arts, and arts in different ways. It can be film, it can be theater, where people go watch some play, it can be music, it can be any form of creativity that comes on board, just to try to reach to the masses that might not be exposed to the heavy language of climate change that most of us are, or a few of us or the elite within that space are. So, and you'll be shocked to learn the communities, our grandmothers, our people at the community level implementing different things that are solutions rather to climate change crisis that we are facing as a globe, have a lot of indigenous knowledge, have a lot of experience, have a lot of history that can really play and help us to provide solutions. Hence the reason why I thought coming to this space is very critical, to try and see the nexus between the community frontliners, the scientists, the journalists, the filmmakers. How do we come together then tell powerful stories and authentic African stories? Because we believe Africa is quite endowed with a lot of resources that can save the entire globe from the crisis that we are facing in terms of climate change.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on the issue of, the climate conversation being quite elitist.
Yeah.
But, it beats the whole point, because at the end of the day, you want the people most affected to understand what they're experiencing. And there's also so much to learn from them because of the solutions they're implementing. And in some of the work I do, I realize they're already doing climate solutions, they just don't know it is climate solutions. And so it's very important to try and bridge that gap through the storytelling, and I truly appreciate you sharing that.
And actually, they know that they're providing solutions, but maybe they have not been given a platform to showcase their work they're doing. And it's the reason why collaboration is very key in terms of seeing how do we amplify the work that they're doing from at the grassroots level, and for the people to be able to see at a global aspect. And thanks to the digital platforms that we have, we are easily connected. We are one village now. It's very easy now people to see what's a farmer in Motomo. Like, for example, with the Thank You for the Rain, a film that we love so much and keep speaking about it because of the impact that it has had in that particular, in Kisilu as a farmer, and also at the community level. If he was able to document his lived experiences with climate change within Motomo. It's a small village in Kitui County. Kitui is in the eastern part of Kenya. If he was able to tell that powerful story in a film, of course with collaborating with Julian Nadal, who is from Norway, and they were able, a researcher from Norway, and they were able to produce this very beautiful film that could explain the experiences that they have and how they've been able to adapt to that, and even provide solution to the community. So it's the power of storytelling. I mean, it goes beyond what we see and can go to encourage other people doing the same solution or providing the same solution to climate adaptation to be able to have their voice heard.
Yeah. I think anyone watching, you have to watch that. Thank you for letting me. Like in this lifetime, make sure you experience it.
Yeah.
And then to you, Sarah, he's really spoken deeply about communities. And of course, some of the work you do, you've talked about restoration of landscapes through various ways. Do you mind expounding more on that, whether you had some of the experiences with the communities you work with, whether it's with the honey, all those issues? So how has that been for you?
Yeah. So for a very long time, and I hear people saying that Africa is a youthful continent. But for a very long time, young people were told to wait their turn. They are not yet ready for leadership or to be spearheading big initiatives. And so for a very long time, even if youth would do that, they would still not be seen. They would still be told, you cannot be compensated for whatever you're doing, or whatever you're doing is not good enough, even if they're still doing very good work, and whatever they're doing is contributing to the well-being of their communities. So this is how Youth for SDGs came to collaborate with Docubox, because we saw a very big opportunity to bring on board young people to spearhead communications where their communities would sometimes be lied to because their communities were not very keen on communicating whatever it is they were experiencing in terms of climate change, or even communicating the solutions that they were implementing on at community levels. So young people are now able to communicate these things, and by so doing, they find a platform at Youth for SDGs where they can now also learn other ways of making sure that these things go out there and people learn about these things, about their community.
So now we'll move to Tabianchi SOS.
Yes.
And for those that don't know, Tabianchi is Swahili for climate change.
Yeah.
And when I was starting the podcast, I remember we had an argument with someone on LinkedIn. They're like,
Yeah.
no, hali ya hewa is not Swahili for climate change. I'm like, yeah, I know. Hali ya hewa is climate or weather. And then climate change is Tabianchi.
Yeah.
So Docubox and Youth for SDGs have been working on a project called Tabianchi SOS. SOS being so many oneni skizeni.
Yeah.
So I'm biased because I like creative stuff.
Yeah.
So kindly share with us, what that project is about, and talk about how many people you've been able to impact, some of the journalists you work with. Yeah.
So we are actually very privileged to have gained support from Hivos. Hivos is also an alliance member of a larger consortium, which is called Voice for Just Climate Action, again, which also is another huge network of organizations doing amazing work in terms of seeing how do we together provide solution to the climate change. And so when we got a grant with in collaboration with or in partnership with Youth for SDG Kenya, we saw how do we synergize with the work that they do with the young people and the youth, and the networks that they have, the kind of the synergy they have built with the young people with this country, and us coming from a film industry where we've been documenting various stories about our community within East African region. How do we then combine these two quite profound synergies that we have and be able to come up with a project like Tabianchi SOS. And the reason it was very deliberate for us when we were starting to use SOS, because we saw the urgency of having conversations about climate change as storytellers, and we saw the other energy that was coming from our partner in this particular project of having a huge network of young people who are really eager to, speak about issues to do with climate change, and not only speak but also take actions to see how then they can be part of the solution to climate crisis that we are facing. And we came together, began with the films first, where we were able to onboard two filmmakers, very great filmmakers, Kini and also Makwamboi, to be able to produce two films that will be able to enlighten people on various aspects of climate change and what the communities are doing down there. So we saw how do we then create nexus between, because there's a huge gap between the creative sector. You find we are all storytellers, you find journalists are telling their stories with a different angle. We find filmmakers are doing the same, musicians are doing in a different way. But we saw how do we come together, the youth, the journalist and the filmmaker, and be able to then command the space and give other millions of young people who are doing something at the grassroots to amplify their voices. Hence that's when we came with this project where we produced two films, but not only we produced two films, but also curated an array of films within the climate-centric films that will be able to go and showcase at the communities where they were developed and other communities where they might not have experience or exposed to what is happening in different parts of Kenya. So you find a film like If Tatu Could Talk, which is shot in Watamu, Mtwapa, and the coastal region, speaking about the marine life, and we would show it in northeastern where they've never experienced that, and they could see how climate change is also affecting people down at the coast. Then we will come with a film from the eastern part of Kenya, Samburu and the Mak community, River of Brown Waters, and people could see how Ewasonyiro, which was once a big river, now is almost extinct, and how climate change is bringing conflict within that belt. And people now in the coastal region can understand. Also people in the northeastern are facing this. But also apart from the challenges that we face, what solution are these communities offering? And they can learn from that inter-county learning that come. So people don't see that they are alone and walking this journey alone. There are other people implementing it in different ways. But we also, apart from that, we saw then the films have been done. The films are showcased. We've curated and screened and do impact screening for these films. Then how do we get to move now from this screening and the entire world to know? And then the journalistic aspect comes on board. And this is why we don't bring journalists who will be able to amplify the stories through writing pieces about what the community climate frontliners are doing down there, the young activists, the young youth advocating for climate change and adaptation, or providing solutions that they believe can be able to save the world. Then get to be known by someone in Sweden, someone maybe somewhere in Baku now. How would they know projects that are within Kenya being done? Again, it's through documenting these stories, through the journalists, and through the films that we produce. So that's how we came about this project. It's been now a year, amazing year. We've seen a lot of support, even from Abigail, where you sit, as also a climate champion. And we've been able to see the power of collaboration. We've been able to see how telling powerful stories will really help people come together, and together we can solve these issues within the climate space.
Yeah. And I must say they're doing amazing work, especially with the screenings. And you, I think in one of the conversations we were having, you talked about how you went to screen a film in like a primary school and a high school, but the kids in primary school were
more
understanding more than the kids who are in high school. So I think these are very important issues, and I love the cross learning from county to county, because of course our contexts are different in as much as we live in the same country, but that cross learning and seeing resilience, also they can draw inspiration and figure out how they can adapt.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
Sarah, I know you've also been part of the project. I think my question to you is there any particular film or story that really impacted you or that stood out for you in some of the films that you've been able to watch and see the journalists carry through?
Okay. So I am just beginning to get to learn more about film from our collaboration with Docubox. I am a fan of film, but the films I've been watching are mostly movies. But yeah, so from the films I have managed to watch from Docubox, I've learned quite a lot in terms of conservation. There's a forest that they highlighted that I did not know they existed. I don't know what forest that is.
It's at the border of the western part of Kenya and Uganda.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there are so many issues that they bring out that myself as a conservationist, I didn't know existed. The issue he just mentioned about the disappearing river, it's something that I didn't know. So I am so glad that we got to collaborate with Docubox, because now I'm getting to see just how important storytelling and film is, because it has a power that any other way of doing things doesn't have. The way that a film can be made here and it can be watched here, and people on this other end can then see that a certain challenge is not just unique to them. It's an issue that is happening everywhere. And with that, there's that development of solidarity. And that with solidarity also, you just realize that you're now able to act even more, knowing that you will benefit your community and in the long run also benefit other people out there who may be in need of the resources that you may be conserving. For instance, when it comes to issues to do with rivers, rivers come from upland. And sometimes people who live upland do not realize that there are people who are suffering downstream because of their actions upland. So if such a film could be made where people downstream show their challenges to the people upstream, then it would be very easy for the people upstream to change their ways, change their perspectives in order to make life much more easier for the people downstream. The film, the Kisilu one, also I love that one very much because I saw impact. For the very first time, when I joined the climate change space, I used to think these are people who just talk. They love talking, but until I saw the impact that talking has on communities. Because when Kisilu was able to go abroad to tell people about the issues that his community was facing, it is then that the community was able to receive assistance. So, yeah, very happy to be here.
No, thank you. I think the Kisilu story is very, I don't know if I can stress it any harder. You all need to watch it. And I think what caught my attention was towards the end, like the community was rejoicing, and finally they got rains.
Yeah.
And that
Yes,
is one
thank
thing
you
that
for
stood
the
out.
rain.
Yeah, that stood out for me in the film.
Yeah.
And I love that both of you have truly highlighted the importance of impact storytelling, especially now when we are. I think almost every one of us has experienced the impact of climate change one way or another. It's no longer a story of it's gonna come.
It's
we are
here
living
with us.
through it.
Yeah.
We're living through it. And you're working in a very important intersection of information sharing and trying to bridge the gap between, very elitist knowledge and communities who are, of course, going through the impacts of climate change. And you've talked about, involving journalists. And I think when I look back, I don't remember seeing, like environmental stories on TV as much. But it feels like now it's the thing that everyone wants to talk about, because we've quickly realized climate change is affecting every aspect of our lives, whether it's food, water, the economics, our livelihoods. So I think it's very important that we do that. So I think my question to you is, what has that been like for you? And I know you've also tried to pair up the journalists with mentors. How many of them would you say have been impacted? What kind of stories are they bringing forth? And, are we seeing more stories geared towards climate action from some of the projects that you've done?
So since we began this project and our very first workshop we had here, we were lucky enough to get some philanthropists come on board. I know they're very unbranded, but they do a lot of work. But they help us to bring in on board mentors who are seasoned journalists, seasoned communication experts. Also, we were able and lucky to get also collaboration with journalists for human rights, who again bring the human rights aspect into the climate change conversation, and also gender issue around that. And we've seen when climate change and how it's affecting gender, especially women and children, they are the mostly adversely affected whenever there is a crisis, like the floods that we experienced the other half of the year, in April, May to July. We could see how women were affected, displaced. Most of them are women, and children could not be able to maneuver that, and even some unfortunately lost their lives. So we've seen great stories coming out of that. We've seen journalists actually now winning awards because of the climate change stories, or the climate stories that they're sharing out there through the publications that they do. We've seen actually there's one, and which the documentary is coming out. It's done by Tabitha in Turkana, Kakuma, and she's featuring how Lake Turkana, the rising waters of Lake Turkana are affecting the fishing community in Turkana. First of all, whenever in Kenya we hear fish, we know it's Kisumu. But we don't know Turkana. There's a lot of it's a freshwater lake. It's a lake. It has sandy beaches like Mombasa. It's beautiful. It's one of the areas that most people have not explored. But also apart from that, it's provide livelihood to a larger community of fishermen and fishing community that is within that place. But now with the climate change and the rising water, it's actually destroying even the resorts that are there, beautiful resorts that were established within that area for ecotourism. Now the fishermen also cannot be able to fish, and the families are displaced, and they have to move far away from the lake. And such thing, we've never known of that. We've only known of how rivers are bursting, because we've known of Lake Baringo, but we never had also an experience with such issue happening in the northern part of Kenya. And now when first we had this workshop and Tabitha was part of it, she was more motivated to do a documentary. As a journalist now transitioning to become a filmmaker and produce a powerful documentary showing what is happening, the lived experiences people within Turkana are having. Apart from that, she's done some couple of stories within the Kakuma, and we know the refugee camps also, they are very largely and adversely affected by issues of climate change, especially with heavy rains, again, with prolonged drought and famine within those areas. It's quite appalling to see such stories now coming out. We've had also journalists who have become passionate about climate, like Dennis Aseto, who is now doing amazing a show called Planet Action within KTN. There's David Kagina. There's so much. Millie Sambweni in West Pokot, documenting how climate change has affected women in that region, within a pastoralist region, and also what those women are doing to provide solutions. So it's good to see also them cutting across the entire country and bringing up now these stories about climate change, and not only showcasing the crisis, but also the solutions. Because also, apart from the crisis, also we are providing quite some good solutions to this. So it's good to see those impactful stories and stories of change within the community.
And then that's very important to see that more journalists are getting inspired to do very impactful stories around issues of climate. And I like that it's not just showcasing the crisis, but also showing what Africa has to offer. And of course, with a very young population of almost 70% of Africans being youth, there's a lot that is coming from them in terms of solutions. Well, I'm really looking forward to watching the film or the documentary on Lake Turkana. Because, we've had a trip
to the north.
Did not materialize.
We finally 2025 or before the end of 2024 actualize it.
We have to actualize it. Anyways, so Sarah, regarding what Ken has shared with the some of the storytelling from the journalists, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes. So another role that these journalists are playing very well is making sure that their communities are informed. Because most of the times when communities are not informed, people take advantage of these communities. So the journalists have decided to be very keen on everything that is happening in the climate change space, to make sure that they are breaking down this information for their communities, so that their communities are well prepared in terms of, in case of, for instance, if things like the carbon markets, things are introduced in their communities. So we are very, very glad to be working with journalists who have their own podcasts. And so by having their own podcasts, it also means that they have a little bit of freedom that other journalists do not enjoy. And so we have journalists at the coast who are helping the communities at the coast to understand what carbon markets are. We have journalists like the same Millie that Ken was talking about, who's helping the women in West Pokot to understand what climate change really is and where they stand in terms of as people who are trying to change their communities as women.
And I like that you talked about the carbon credits issue, because we've had the privilege of seeing maybe the first cut of the Mikoko. And what stood out for me for that film was just how communities are literally getting nothing. They're getting nothing from carbon markets. It's like, obviously, for a community member, if you give them small monies, to them it's like, oh, we're actually making money from this, but they don't see the bigger picture of those are consultants, those government, like people have already taken so much money from the credits, yet they're the ones who are supposed to be custodians and to take care of this same forest. And so that is quite an important film, and I hope there'll be an opportunity for a lot more people to see it. And as we conclude, so what next for you, Sarah, is, bid for SDGs in the next year? Are there any activities that are coming up that you should watch out for? And also, as you as a conservationist, based off of your experience, because like you said, it's like a new space for you when it comes to filmmaking and storytelling. Are there things that ideally would change for you moving forward?
For sure. So with the exposure that I've gotten from VCA, I have learned that at the root or at the center of everything we are implementing in the conservation space, justice has to be considered. So moving forward as a conservationist, I will make sure that our community is being looked out for when it comes to the implementation of a certain project. What are they getting out of a certain opportunity? Are they being set aside in order for a certain project to be implemented, or are they involved fully? So these are things that I'll be keen to look out for in order to make sure that the justice aspect of conservation or just the SDGs in general is being enforced. And so that is something that I have learned. And as Youth for SDGs, we are looking to really make sure that young people are participating actively in all the other sustainable development goals. There are 17 of them, and so far we've really just focused on SDG 13. We want to make sure that we are also doing something under SDG 5, that is under gender. We also want to make sure that we are doing something in things to do with sanitation, things to do with poverty eradication and hunger, SDG 2, among other sustainable development goals. So we are very, very keen to collaborate with young people who are keen on the sustainable development goals, to give them the skills that they need to make sure that they are looking out for the targets that the Agenda 30 has set out to achieve. So if you're out there, you're watching, reach out to me to collaborate so that we can make sure that the Agenda 2030 is also being enforced in the various policies that are being developed in Kenya, in the country.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, I'll be sure to share your information, links to the work that you do, so that anyone who feels like they want to collaborate, they can reach out to you easily.
Thank you.
And Ken, as we conclude, you as a storyteller, and the wonderful year that you had with the experience as a journalist. So what's next for Tabianchi SOS?
Yes, and I've been looking at some statistics, and I love research sometimes. It gets the conversation. And if you look, what they are saying is that in the next 2050, Africa will be 2.2 billion in terms of population, and it will be 25% of the global population, the world population. And in that 70%, as you said, will be young people. So for us, as in the storytelling, that means a lot, because there's power in numbers, and having that Africa will be actually one of the largest in terms of population, young population, leading globally. Then we have a lot of resources endowed. We have a lot of power within us to change and shift the narrative. And this is whereby now, and this can only be done if we right information is imparted into these people, young people. They're involved and they're given spaces whereby they can be able to articulate their issues at that global stage, and taking center stage in creating long-term or impact or solution to the climate crisis. For us, it's to work with as many young storytellers, and in fact there's a youth project that is coming on board, which is called Climate Storytelling, that involves Tunga Africa, Climate Story Lab Africa, and as well as Docubox and at extension Youth for SDG. And we've worked together with Youth for SDG in many climate youth-led projects, the Climate Story Lab, for quite a long time, and we are happy to continue this conversation and see how do we then take storytelling into schools, student within the primary, high school, junior high school, and the larger community of students, even at the university. I start haki hiyo kitabu nitaendelea hapo kwa project ya school, si ndio? So there's a huge project that we've been able to partner with Ministry of Education. We've also been able to partner with Tunga Africa, and also Climate Story Lab Africa, Docubox as well, and Youth for SDG at an extension. And we're happy to see that now we are taking these climate storytelling to high schools and primary schools, to students, because we believe the alpha generation that is coming up, they'll be more adversely affected by the climate change, and they will then be the largest group of people in the world from Africa. So if we start harnessing this power and these knowledgeable, these very exposed kids who know how to use technology, who know how to create movements within even use of TikTok and other social media platforms. We've seen this with the Gen Z Mandamano. You can imagine what Alpha will do at the time they again. So if we impart the right information, if we give them the right spaces, the platform guided and given the support that they need, then they'll be driving the conversations at a global stage, and Africa will actually be providing solutions to climate change. And they know how to guard their continent, not to be exploited, because we've seen how exploitation has led to more damage into our continent that was beautifully made, that is still beautiful, but we've seen how companies are coming to extort minerals from this, and we've seen how especially fossil fuel is damaging the Niger Delta. Speak of Congo and what is happening there, and so many other, even here in Kenya, we've seen what's happening with some companies coming and want to even get into into the reserves, getting into the forest just to mine and exploit the country, but at the expense of the people living down there. So if we can give the right information through storytelling, if young people can be able to share their experiences, then they can be able to share their possible solution that they want to take, then it will be good. I was reading something, or rather listening to something today, and someone was saying, whenever, and it's even with me, nowadays whenever I open a newspaper, I'm angered. I'm so angry with whatever I see there. And then how do we take and make our anger actionable? Just instead of you getting annoyed and just leaving it at that particular point, how do you take actions that will then help to better the situation than where we are? Because we are at a brink of a huge crisis at a global stage, and we have to really, really take action at an individual level.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And you know, like everything you're saying is like my antenna just goes up. And you brought out very important issues on, you know, the continuous exploitation of our continent, the injustice, neocolonialism that still exists. And I think the media has such a big role to play. Like, I dream of a time where we will be exposing them and, you know, call out the hypocrisy of even this big, you know, we go to COPs and, you know, people are signing fossil fuel deals here and there. And then Africa is like we show up without a plan and we are always coming back home with nothing. Yet, at the end of the day, we actually tried to do a story on, but of course, it didn't quite come out, but on the issue of energy transition and critical minerals, where are the minerals coming from us? And see the experiences of people in Congo. They have the lithium for the batteries we use for the cars. Globally. Like, it's, so where is the aspect of climate justice in all this? In as much as we're talking about transition, we see how our continent is continuously exploited. So how do we platform such stories and not be quiet about it? And I think maybe this is something that Docubox can think about.
Absolutely.
To, you know, sort of take it forward.
There's actually one of the and where we can draw nexus between film and journalism. One of the most beautiful films I've watched this year called The Battle for Laikipia. And you've had a chance, Sarah, I'll make sure you watch it.
Thank you.
Because it's within the space that you thrive in, conservation. And the one thing is that this story actually was first done by a journalist. Then the filmmaker got to watch it and felt we can go more deeper and find what the real issue happening at that particular community, which is the Samburu community, or the so many communities living within the Laikipia county or the Laikipia belt, and what is happening between the community and the different communities living there in terms of conservation and the climate change, impact of climate change that they're experiencing and the conflict that is bringing, but also how do we then find a coexistence where a sustainable solution can come from both communities and then learn how to coexist. So without one benefiting so much and the other one feeling quite infringed. So this it's true, as you've said, we need to find out how do we get these stories out there, how do we journal. We've seen the shrinking space of media, and sometimes it's deliberately done because who owns the media? Now, who has the power for the media? We've seen now in terms of revenues, the media don't get revenues. Sometimes you find government agencies have the largest budget for publicity, for marketing. And when you speak loud against the authority, then you find that's money going to those who speak in favor of the authority. And so how do we then create community journalism, people-centered journalism, where people themselves can be able to amplify these stories in spaces that are not infringed, spaces where they can reach the masses and tell the stories and their lived experiences at the grassroots level.
Yeah.
And I think it's you've even been very polite with the battle for Ethiopia. I'm not like I shed tears. I shed tears.
I'm being diplomatic.
You're very diplomatic, but it still brings up the issue of the injustices that you are talking about. And I like that you said moving forward, you make sure justice is at the center of all the solutions that we're trying to create. I know we could go on and on. But I think we can come to an end. But we are basically, I've gotten to see just how much impact the Voices for Just Climate Action project has had, and I love that it is a consortium of people doing very many things. You guys are doing media. We have people
Diversity.
It's quite diverse, and I hope the world will get to see and know some of the amazing things that are happening not only in Kenya but in also other countries that we are a part of. Some are literally helping legislation at county level to figure out their climate change acts with the ward climate change committees. We are seeing some of our partners doing puppetry at community level. The arts. We've seen, there are some who are in the informal settlements, and they were very active in helping the communities during the devastation of the floods in April to try and resettle them and pacify them for that season that was quite difficult, where they had to be relocated. They had some lost their lives, and these are real issues, real life experiences, and I'm really privileged and honored to be part of a project that has this much impact on communities. So keep doing the good work, and I'm sure we'll have another conversation. But this was Hali Hewa Podcast, the second episode. On the first episode, we platformed Clean Cooking Alliance of Kenya, Association of Kenya, and they talked about some of the clean cooking solutions we have in Kilifi counties, etc. So you're yet to hear more beautiful stories and beautiful grassroots action. So thank you so much. See you on the next one.
Bye-bye.